You are welcome to our Sunday worship service. Highly impactful messages, unique Christian fellowship, life-transforming worship service, burden-lifting prayers. Evangelical Global Outreach Church, EGOC, London Parish, House of Wonders, Latimer Hall, 75 Cleves Road, London, E6 1QF. Time, 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. For counseling, prayers, and more information, please call +44 07958 083 479. Email pastor@egoc.org.uk. Website www.egoc.org.uk. Your total well-being is our concern.
Father Lord, we thank you for this day that you have brought us together, Lord, to worship you. To worship you in spirit and in truth. We thank you for this day that you have brought us together in love, to lift up holy hands unto you, Father, and to be blessed by you. Lord, this day we commit ourselves into your hands once again. We pray, Lord, that, Lord, you will continue to uphold us with your right hand.
Amen.
We pray, Lord God, that the entrance of your word will give light unto our lives in Jesus.
Amen.
And people will see your light in us.
Amen.
And we glorify you back in Jesus.
Amen.
Thank you, Heavenly Father.
Thank you, Lord.
In Jesus' mighty name we are praying.
Amen.
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 In the book of 1 Kings chapter 3, we are going to read from verse 16 to 28. 1 Kings chapter 3 from verse 16 to 28. And we are going to today look at a trial by ordeal. A trial by ordeal. 1 Kings chapter 3 from verse 16 to 28. 1 Kings chapter 3 from verse 16 to 28. Trial by ordeal. Then came there two women that were harlots unto the king, and stood before him. And the one woman said, O Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the third day after I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also. And we were together. And there was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night, because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight, and took my son from beside me while thy handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. And the other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Then said the king, The one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is the dead. And the other said, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Trial by ordeal is a form of judicial practice in the times of old, even as we see in the scriptures at the time of King Solomon. And it is a way in which we find, or they try to find who is the guilty or who is the innocent in a matter by subjecting that person to a painful or unpleasant or dangerous experience. Nowadays, it is no longer practiced, because in this case, in this trial, it is a matter of life and death. And survivor was just a proof of whether the person was innocent or guilty. Today we have the human rights. And this was after the Second World War. Nations gathered themselves together and said, okay, we are going to create a charter and we are going to declare basic rights to every human being. And there were 30 rights that were declared, and I can summarize it into your right to dignity, your right to fairness, your right to equality, your right to respect, and your right to independence. In the olden days, it wasn't so. That is, people did whatever they wanted to do by whatever laws they had. Even in the practice, we see that in the Bible, we see that this is an example of a trial by ordeal. It was very dangerous for people who come before the judge to either accuse or to defend. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
What do we see? The methods involved. Why do we say this is dangerous? Because the methods involved are methods of combat or challenge. Method of trial by oath, or trial by fire, or by water, which is either hot or cold, or trial by taking poison, so, or boiling oil. So in the olden days, people did this because they didn't know any better. We look at this case that was brought before King Solomon. In this case, it would have taken more or less than 3 hours to find out who the mother of the child was. But in the olden days, they couldn't do that because they didn't have technology like, oh, how do we know whether there is DNA or there is, they couldn't solve those. The blood group was trying to find out who the child was really linked to. But we see that even in the olden days, they were still able to find out by ordeal, the trial by ordeal, who was guilty or who was innocent. But there were a lot of deaths, I must tell you, because in this case, if a person takes poison and dies, how are you going to find out whether the person is lying? You are just assuming that the person is guilty. Praise the Lord. Now,
hallelujah.
I'll give examples of trials by oath. If we look at the book of Numbers from verse 5, Numbers chapter 5, 11 to 22, it tells about trial by oath. So if you look at the book of Kings, chapter 18, verse 20, 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 22 to 24, it was a trial by combat or by challenge in which Elijah called the people of God and said, all right, let's see whether God is God or your Baal is God. It was a trial in which there was a challenge between the God of Elijah and the God of Baal. And we found out that the God of Elijah was the true God. But what happened to the prophets of Baal? They all died. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
So we have instances in which people are told to take poison in order to prove that they are guilty or innocent. We have instances in which people are told to dip their hands into boiling water so that they say, oh, okay, pick this thing from boiling water. If you are guilty, then the water will burn you. If you are not guilty, it won't burn you. But I'm very sure all of us here know that cannot, it's not the right way to judge things. But it's this trial by ordeal is what the king used to solve the problem. So we are going to look at these ones as subtopics. The judge, the case, the appellants, the evidence, the witnesses, the ordeal, and finally the decision. We are going to look at it again in subtopics: the judge, the case, the appellants, the evidence, the witnesses, the ordeal, and finally the decision. The judge, in 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 16, we read, then there came 2 women that were harlots unto the king and stood before him. Now, they just said the king here, but by looking at it, by reading from the first verse, we know that the king here is Solomon. Now, even though they didn't name the woman and they didn't name the king, we can deduce from reading from the first verse that the king here is Solomon because he was presiding over Israel at that time. Now, The king had already asked God for a heart that is skillful to listen and to govern justly, to distinguish between good and bad, to distinguish between evil and what was right. And God gave him his request. God granted his request. So the king, the judge in this matter was Solomon. The case. Now this case we can also see in 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 22. What is this case about? It says, and the other woman said, nay, but the living son is mine, and the dead son is your son. And this said, no, but the dead son is your son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. So the case is about who is the mother of the living child and who is the mother of the dead child. And to find out who was sincere between these two women. So these two women have brought the matter before the king. They both had sons, but an unfortunate incident happened in the night. One of the sons died, and there is now a dispute, or there was now a dispute between whose son the living one is and whose son the dead one is. So we have looked at the judge, and we know what the case is. The case is a dispute about whose the living child belonged to. Now we are going to look at the appellant. Now, the appellant in 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 16, we read again that there came two women that were harlots unto the king. So these appellants were two women, and they were also the respondents. In some cases, in some courts, they call them the litigants, the people who bring case to the courts. And the person who is supposed to defend it is called the defendant or the respondent. That is, you are the one responding to the appeal. So they have appealed to the king to say that we want this matter resolved. Now, there are protocols when you get to a court. So the protocol stipulates that when you get to a court, the judge will ask you, you see, when you first get to a court, they will say, all stand or all rise before judge this, because the judge is going to, you have to be there in the court before the judge comes. So when the judge now comes into the court, they say, all rise, all of you will stand up. And when the judge sits down, then all of you will sit down. So then the court clerk will now bring the case. That is, this case, so it is a case between this person that is saying this. They will tell everybody what the case is about. So before they proceed with the case, the appellants, the people who have come to the court and the defendant, there is a protocol. They must state their names. They will tell you, what is your name? Where is your residence? What is your occupation? Now, so sometimes they ask you to give witness statement. That is, you will already have written your statement. That is, this is what happened, this is what happened, and you will sign it to say, I certify that what I've written is the truth and nothing but the truth. So sometimes in the court, they tell you to swear or make an oath. So we have protocol in the court. So, and by protocol, these people will have stated their names, they will have stated where they lived, they will have stated their occupation. So we have the litigant or the appellant. Then we have the evidence. The evidence. So you must now state your evidence. That is, you must state what has happened. Now, in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 17 to 22, I read, and one woman said, O Lord, my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the third day, after I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. And there was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night, because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me, while the handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. And when I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son which I did bear. And the other woman said, nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is your son. And thus they speak before the king. Now, that is the evidence of the matter. The one and the other gave evidence. Normally, when you get to court, they give you the opportunity to speak. So, just like we have said about the human rights. Even in these days, in the day of Solomon, they had rights to speak. Do you know that because of their occupation, they were both prostitutes? They did not forbid them to go before the king. In fact, in this matter, if you look at it very carefully, other people may have said, no, take your case. No, go. I don't want, because of the type of trade they were in. I don't want to listen. Take your matter, just go to the king. And because the king was the highest authority, he would have, he gave them opportunity to listen to them. Moreover, Solomon himself had a lot of women. He says he had 1,000 of them. So, whether because he wanted to, because if you are going to have 1,000 women, you are going to have more than 1,000 wahalas. So, he gave them opportunity, maybe to gather experience. That, okay, in my house, if I am going to give 1,000, I need to know how to deal with this, with these issues. So he gave them opportunity. Not only that, Solomon had women who worshipped the goddess Ashtoreth, who was the goddess of the Sidonians. That's the people from Sidon. So they were the Phoenicians. And because he had such women, he had women in his house who, this goddess was, she's associated with temple prostitution. So she had people in his own palace who were associated with temple prostitution. But because Solomon just liked women, so he was liberal towards whatever was happening. So he gave them opportunity and listened to them. In addition, because of their trade, their evidence were not credible because of their character. You see, when you go to a court, that is why they ask you your name, they ask you your address, they ask you your occupation. That is what do you do? So they want to find out the credibility of what you are saying. What you are saying, is it credible? As Christians, we must be credible. What we are saying, when we say yes, we must mean it is yes. When we say no, we must mean it is no. So, but these people, these two ladies, the ladies of the night who came to Solomon, their evidence were not credible. So it was very difficult to believe to believe either of them. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Now, we've looked at the appellants, we've looked at the evidence. Now we are looking at the witnesses. Were there witnesses in this event that happened? Yes. The two women and their two sons. So we have two sons who witnessed what happened. Unfortunately, one was dead of the son. And the other one, who is alive, cannot speak because it was a suckling child. So we have two witnesses. So the other witness who is alive, you can't call upon a child that can't speak to say, okay, come and tell us what really happened. Which one of them is your mother? So we don't know yet. But we have cases in which they have called on the thing that people were arguing about. We have a case, a very prominent case in Nigeria, when somebody stole a goat. And then she stole a goat. The goat, she stole it. She stole the goat, and kept it for over 5 years. Then one day she decided, oh, I'm going to go and sell this goat in the market. And while she was trying to sell that goat in the market, the owner of the goat saw it and said, this is my goat. And then so they took it to the magistrate. And the magistrate asked them, okay, who owns this goat? And the woman said, it's my goat. That one, the other one said, it's my goat. The woman who owned the goat said, look, it's my goat. I raised it from a kid, and I even gave it a name. So the judge said, okay, are you sure? He said, yes. So the judge said, okay, call him by his name. Let's see. And when she called that goat by the name, the judge just came running to her. Said, give her a goat, it's a goat. So, yeah. So, in this case, they tried the subject. And if you look at this film, that the war horse, you see that even that horse went over nations during the war. And he still knew its owner or his original owner. So when that boy called on it, even the boy was blind. By the time he was calling on it, the horse still knew, oh, this is my master. So you see animals. That is, even if you tame an animal, if you train it, 20 years, if you call it, it will still recognize you. We have lions, big lions, hugging the person who raised them up. So praise the Lord. But in this case, this child cannot tell, because it's still a suckling child. And there was no DNA tested in that. So what is now the ordeal? So we have looked at the judge. We have looked at the case. We have looked at the appellants. We have looked at the evidence. We have looked at the witnesses. Now we are looking at the ordeal. What is this ordeal? Now, in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 24 and 25, I read, "And the king said, bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other." That's the ordeal. But what is strange about this ordeal is that it's a very rare case. Normally, when you want to subject to an ordeal, you subject the people who have brought the case, not the subject of the case. This child is the subject of the case. He is not the appellant. He's not the one who brought the case to court. So the people you want to find whether they are guilty or they are innocent, they are the ones you subject to an ordeal. But Solomon has turned the thing around. He's now taking this child and subjecting him to an ordeal, that we are going to slice him into two, and then we are going to give half to one of them and half to the other. So the child is the thing they are contending about. So normally, by doing this, you are subjecting the woman to a very traumatic experience. So it's still going to touch the woman, but the child itself is the one who is going to go through the experience of life and death. Now, the judge here is a king. In a kingdom, the king is all-powerful. There is no appeal. That is, once the king says, do this, they just do it. There's no opposition. The king's word is final. In those days, there's no separation between the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. That is, nowadays, we don't have such things. But in these days, the king was everything. It is the king who gave the law. It is the king who judged the case. It is the king now who is the all-powerful. So if everything happens, the king, the king gets away scot-free. But in these days, it doesn't happen like that. But praise the Lord, we have a more open system of government these days. Now, the decision. Finally, the decision. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 37, we read about Jesus saying that by your word, you will be judged, whether for good or for evil. Now, when the king says, bring me a sword, and the king said it without opposition, you know what happened? These women now made their final statement. In a court, you are given, before the judge gives a decision, the solicitors or the lawyers, they are given, or you yourself, you are given a time to make a final statement before the judge makes a decision. So you see, the final statement is just the appeal to say, this is my case, this is my case, this is my case, this is what has happened, and I want you, my judge, to look at it favorably or to be lenient in whatever you are doing. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
But the final statement of this woman was that one of them gave in. When the king said, okay, we are going to have to split this child into two, one of them just gave in and said, okay, I'm no longer going to contend for the child. That is, save the child's life. Give it to the other woman. Just save her life, just give it to the other woman. And by doing so, it means her demand. She was no longer demanding for the child. She says, okay, I give in. Whatever you want to do, I give you. I'm no longer bringing a case against you. Give the child to the other woman. But the other one did not say so. The other one says, no, king, just like you said, split the child into two. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah.
Now, as Christians, we are not advocates of death. We are advocates of life. We are called to life, not to death. We are called to love. We are not called to destroy. It is the devil that comes to steal. It is the devil that comes to destroy. We are not called to that. We have come so that people, just like Jesus Christ, so that people may have life and they may have it abundantly. The love we have in us is unfeigned, because God's love is unfeigned. God's love is so deep that he sent his only son. There was no man. When they go to the east, or you go to the west, or you go to the north, or you go to the south, who could have bridged the gap between man and God? It took God himself to step in the gap. That's the kind of love that God has for us. And this is the kind of love God wants us to have for one another. He says, love is kind. Love does not behave itself unseemly. Love does not seek her own. This woman, eventually, when it came to a matter of that, okay, we will just kill the child. She didn't seek her own. She didn't say, okay, she just gave up. No, don't worry. Let the child live and give it to the other woman. At least that will spare the child's life. That is the type of love we must have. Love does not think evil of the other person. Love does not rejoice in iniquity. Love rejoices only in the truth. And I pray in the name of Jesus, that will be the kind of love we have for one another in Jesus' name.
Amen.
The case was decided by the final words of these two women. And I pray the sincerity, even as sincerity will be seen in our words in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Wherever we are, the light of God will be seen in our lives in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Let us bow down our heads to pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for your word today. We thank you for your truth. We thank you, Lord, for your unshaking love. We thank you, Lord, for your love that does not fail. It is your love that has sucked us out of the darkness of this world. It is your love that has brought us to the marvelous light of Christ Jesus. We pray, Lord, that we will continue to walk with you.
Amen.
Continue to hold on to your truth.
Amen.
Continue, Lord, to live a life that is worthy of your calling in Jesus.
Amen.
Thank you, Heavenly Father.
Thank you, Lord.
In Jesus' mighty name, we have prayed.
Amen.
You are welcome to our Sunday worship service. Highly impactful messages, unique Christian fellowship, life-transforming worship service, burden-lifting prayers. Evangelical Global Outreach Church, EGOC, London Parish, House of Wonders, Latimer Hall, 75 Cleves Road, London, E6 1QF. Time, 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. For counseling, prayers, and more information, please call +44 07958 083 479. Email pastor@egoc.org.uk. Website www.egoc.org.uk. Your total well-being is our concern.